Voila.
Whoa! That was a unique can tab hole situation, Chris.
I gave it some English. I kind of gave it a little top spin.
Yeah, yeah.
Not different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's just a perfect way to kick off December and, and the holiday season here on FUMFA Poets and Writers Live, a nice, crispy, unique beer opening. We love it. Let's get I took our logo down last time because it was over one of our veteran writers' heads.
Great.
So I just put it back up there. Oh my God, it's good to be back, Chris. It felt like such a long vacation that we had there, didn't it?
It did. It feels like we haven't been here in a long, long time, and it was way back in November of 2022.
Oh my
On the
God.
13th.
Oh my
Long
God.
time ago. I hope people remember us.
People remember us. It really does feel like a long time ago.
We're still here.
And all kinds of great stuff happened in that time. And if you've been following us on social media, you got to see it. We had an incredible in-person open mic last month at Eco Evolution. Go holiday shopping. Code open mic for 10% off online and in person. Anyways, but we had an incredible open mic there. We had Kira McSpice and FUMFA's own Rebecca Dimian and Pete Nelson. They were incredible. Our signups and walk-ins and audience were incredible. It was a cozy little night, and we had just a teensy bit of snow. It was absolutely glorious. So don't miss our December in-person open mic on Friday, December 16th. We already have several signups, Chris. Did you see that?
Oh, no, I haven't. I know Melissa's told us that, but I don't know if she went to the official sign up.
Well, you know what? I popped her on the sign up because I
Yeah.
know that I saw her email. But on our official sign up, we already have Phil
Get
Lillis.
out of here.
Phil is coming down. Listen, he is coming down from Massachusetts, people. If you are free, carpool down with Phil if you're up there. Come on down. We're so excited. Phil is going to be with us. We have a few other signups already. It's filling up. So we really hope to see you there. Please sign up or just come listen, shop, grab a coffee, bring a BYOB beer, and just enjoy the evening. It's become such a lovely, cozy community evening full of FUMFA fun and just great local artists and writers. It's such a pleasure, isn't it, Chris?
It is, and there's going to be, a holiday vibe going on there.
Yes.
Which is cool, and who knows what might happen.
Yeah, exactly. Major holiday vibes, peeps. And if it's been a while since you have seen some FUMFA folks, just like it was for Tina DeMarco, who came down in November. Tina, we haven't seen Tina maybe since like 2008.
It's been a while.
It's been a minute. 2011, I don't know. But she came down and signed up and read, and it was awesome. So please do come down. If you haven't seen anybody for a while, we were hoping to bring some holiday party vibes, and it'll be just a great time to just catch up and have fun. That's very important to have fun, Chris.
I believe it is, especially
it is.
Like, what's the point otherwise?
Exactly.
Sometimes we cry a little.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
It's we feel all of our feelings. Yeah.
Or there could be an injury.
Memoir piece, perhaps.
Moving memoir piece or a magic accident.
No, please. Oh, please. Our parlor trick guy really keeps us on our toes. We have a wonderful local young man who has been testing out parlor tricks that he learned, and one of them involved needles. It had a Halloween theme. It was crazy.
Needles ingested needles, which made us all cringe a little. And
Yeah.
I believe I cried. I cried a little.
I was like laughing and screaming. It was a wild mix. I didn't even post all the videos on social media. I was afraid that I might get flagged for posting something scary. You know, the FUMFA Poets and Writers Live is really posting all of that graphic content.
That's right.
That Instagram needs to worry about, you know? Well, my God, it's time for our official welcome.
It sure is.
Chatting away over here. We see you coming in, Mom and Dad, Marie Mitchell. We're glad to see you here. We see some other friends coming in. Welcome. But official welcome to all of you. Hey, Midnight!
Hey, Midnight!
Oh, Midnight, we missed you. Midnight, we need to get you and Chance on with your book manuscripts. We're going to be in touch. We love you so much. We're so glad to see you. But official welcome to FUMFA 114. Tonight we have with us FUMFA superstars Alena Dillon and former faculty Baron Wormser and one of my incredible mentors. So it's going to be an awesome night of readings, and please stick around for the Q&A as well. It's going to be wonderful. And Chris, tell the audience what we have coming up.
Well, next week on December 11, right here, we will have some more FUMFA All-Stars. We've got Rebecca Dimian, who's got a new book out or about to be coming out, and then another book like right after that. Like
awesome.
And so that's going to be fantastic. And we also have Derek Ivan Webster, who has his book is it's not published yet, but it's out there. He's got an agent, and it's making the rounds, and I'm expecting any minute now to hear that sucker is going to be published. It's really good. So that happens next week, and then the following week is our next in-person open mic. That's the 16th of December at Echo Evolution, and in South Norwalk, and we've got some awesome folks lined up for that, including Laurel Peterson.
Yes, that's right.
Speaking of FUMFA All-Stars, but also the great Nettie Smith and Jesse McAtee, and then a whole bunch of people, including Phil Lemos.
That's right.
Mrs. Slattery and a whole bunch of other people. And then it's the holidays, taking a little time off. We'll be back on the 8th of January with our New Year open mic. So if you're interested in participating in that, please let us know.
Yes.
8th of January in the year 2023.
That's crazy. That's a crazy number, Chris.
Yeah, like a science fiction kind of a number, you know.
It is.
You see a movie about like spaceships and people living on Mars and stuff, and it'd say 2023. Okay, I can see that, but here we are.
Here we are
as messed up as ever, but you know. Cheers.
Somehow we're making it through, and we're thankful for that. And you all are a big part of that. Our dear friends, our writing community, our audience, our pals, our family. Your support and participation and all the cool stuff that you're creating really helps keep us going. So we can approach a crazy number year like 2023 with a lot of with a good amount of joy, I think.
Great year. It's gonna be an awesome year.
It's gonna be an awesome year for sure.
Year. That's right. The film version of Shriver will be out, which it's no longer called Shriver, unfortunately. I'm not happy about. So you keep your eyes peeled for A Little White Lie. It's a stupid ass title, but it's a good movie. A good movie. That'll be out in March.
Listen, you all better keep both eyes peeled, because as soon as this movie comes to the East Coast, we are We are planning major viewing parties. It's gonna be FUMFA friends and fans and local writer friends. It's gonna be madness. It's gonna be tons of fun, and we need to celebrate this movie and this moment.
Oh yeah.
And get together and watch it. Oh, we got some crazy things in the chat.
Uh-oh.
We're gonna block that person. We're blocking.
That's
That
been a
happened
while
on
since we've
YouTube. That person is blocked. Wow, you know what? That must mean that we're hitting the big time, Chris. That we get some porno ads.
That's right. Here we are. We're a success now.
Real success. That the pornos think that we're gonna help them make money. That's hilarious.
Well,
Anyways, so that was on YouTube. If you didn't see that on Facebook, don't be alarmed. It is now gone forever, thank goodness. But yes, Brenda, we see you. We're so excited that that you are excited for the Shriver Little White Lie viewing party,
yeah.
and we
I
will
still call it Shriver. I'm just gonna call it Shriver.
We're gonna call it Shriver. We're gonna call it the movie version of Shriver.
Dumb.
Yeah, well, we need to welcome our first reader of the evening. We are stoked to welcome FUMFA All-Star Alena Dillon. Welcome, Alena.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you back, and we are so excited for all of your books, and we're pumped for your reading tonight.
Yeah, and I'm pumped to see the movie formerly known as Shriver.
Yes! I absolutely love it. That is perfect. Chris, would you do the honors of reading Alena's bio?
Of course I will. Alena Dillon is the author of Mercy House, a Library Journal Best Book of 2020, as well as The Happiest Girl in the World, a Good Morning America pick, My Body is a Big Fat Temple, which is a memoir of pregnancy and early parenting, and now her most recent novel, Eyes Turned Skyward. Her work has appeared in publications including The Daily Beast, Lit Hub, River Teeth, Slice Magazine, The Rumpus, and Bustle. She teaches creative writing and lives on the North Shore of Boston, and we're very happy to have Alena here because she's going to get too big for us, and I don't know.
We're very lucky to have her
right now. While we can.
Enjoy this.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah.
Take it away, Alena.
All right. Thanks so much. Yeah. So my new book, Eyes Turn Skyward, I love the cover, is out and has been for about a month. So it's about a woman Air Force service pilot during World War II and her daughter 60 years later. So it's a dual timeline. Today I'm going to read a chapter in which the daughter, she's middle-aged and she's going to visit her mother in a rehab facility. Her mother had fallen and broken a hip, and she has to break the news to her mother that she and her brothers have decided to actually just move her mother into a home. So the novel's about like caregiving the elderly, and then also, the lifetime of complicated relationship between a mother and daughter, and then ultimate reconciliation throughout the novel. And then if I have time, because I'm not sure how long this will take, I'll read a sample from the chapter in which Peggy, the older character, joins the Women Air Force Service pilots. What struck Kathy first about Clearview Rehabilitation Center was the stewy smell of baby powder, urine, and hot TV dinners. It recalled how sensitive she'd been to odors throughout her pregnancies when the wrong whiff of a patient would double her over. She wondered how expecting staff managed in this place. The decor was sterile, as if a hospital wing had detached and sailed down the I-95 corridor. The floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Everything was coated in eggshell paint. The tables were wood laminate and steel. The doors had commercial-grade levers and were equipped with handicap-accessible push buttons. And the only wall art was glass-encased fire extinguishers and emergency protocols. What awaited Kathy wouldn't be any warmer. A mother forsaken to convalesce alone for a week. No, Kathy reminded herself, 5 days, without a visit from her only local child. Worse, Kathy had silenced her phone at her mother's ringtone as guilt dropped around her like heavy snow. Instead of groveling, Kathy would break bad news, masquerading as the opposite. Frank's friend had worked a small miracle. There was a spot for Peggy at Seaside Assisted Living Facility. At the end of her rehab, she would move directly there without going home. Kathy passed a man slumped in a wheelchair. She wondered if he'd been waiting for assistance so long he'd fallen asleep, or if she should check for a pulse. A woman shuffled by on a walker footed with grungy tennis balls. A pair of residents gazed out a window onto the roaring highway below. Seaside's website featured spirited seniors with shiny silver hair strolling gardens and laughing over games of bocce. Grandchildren spilled across their laps inside their independent apartments. For all Kathy knew, that was deceptive marketing, and Seaside was the hell to this purgatory. Maybe she and her brothers were being hasty, callous even. Then Kathy remembered what Frank had said on their most recent conference call. You have to be firm from the start. If Mom catches a hint of wishy-washiness, it's over. We could lose her spot. My buddy is doing us a huge favor. Don't be the messenger if you can't handle it. Kathy clung to her purse like an inadequate life raft and sunk deeper into the building. In Peggy's room, a coat of fern green paint, primrose patterned quilts, and a beige valance over the window were nods towards coziness, but not enough to disguise its distinctly medical property. Kathy thought of one of Peggy's expressions. You could put lipstick on a pig, but she still stinks, just as an industrial toilet bellowed across the hall. Though it was still midday, blinds descended the room into evening. The floor-to-ceiling curtain that divided the roommates had been pulled, but not enough to block the view. The woman in the far bed filled the entire mattress. She grinned gummily. The quilt on the nearest bed, presumably Peggy's, was gathered near the foot, exposing rumpled sheets. Her mother was elsewhere, in physical therapy, or perhaps Kathy thought hopefully making a friend. Once Peggy had regularly invited Air Force wives for mint juleps on the porch, but she'd become solitary in her older age. Many members of her circle had moved in with children, or worse, died. It would be nice for Peggy to have social gatherings again. Kathy made a note to work that into her proposal. Then she gestured an apology to the roommate and stepped out. Car trouble? The wintry gust of her mother's voice whisked around the doorway. Kathy stepped back in and found Peggy in an armchair wedged into the corner, her hands folded primly over the closed paperback in her lap. No, why? Kathy asked. As soon as the words escaped, she saw where this was going, and she had played right into Peggy's trap. I can't imagine why else it would take a week for you to visit, although it doesn't explain your broken phone. Peggy was still striking, even beautiful, but she appeared to have shrunk, unless it was just the chair, whose cushions were so flat it seemed as if the arms were swallowing her. Her hair fell down her shoulders in straggly curls, dry and frizzy at the ends. The uncharacteristic style made her seem older and younger at once, wild but wearied. Still, she was elegant, even here. Her blouse was stitched with ribbons of lace, and the high, almost Victorian neck was buttoned to the top, her necklace resting atop the collar. Her makeup was fresh and vibrant, particularly the coral of her lips. Her long fingers were thick and gnarled by age, but coiled around the faded upholstery as if she were a small queen rejecting her diminished circumstances. Kathy became keenly aware of her larger size and frumpiness. She should have put on some mascara, or at least a fitted top. Kathy said feebly, I've been busy. Peggy inched taller, as if nourished by her daughter's unease. Busier than Fiona, who borrowed a friend's car to see me, and everybody who managed a phone call despite jobs and children, some younger than yours. There was, what, a sick neighbor, a volunteer obligation, the truth? Her jaw edged toward the satisfaction of a crack, but she stopped herself. Her mother hated that habit. I should have been here, I'm sorry. Peggy's puffed feathers compressed, almost disappointed, but she composed herself and continued. Did you see what your brother said? Kathy appreciated the change in topic until she realized the question was a different entry into the same conversation, the ways in which Kathy fell short. A bouquet of lilies, the shade of Peggy's lipstick, burst from its vase in such gratuity the whole thing could be toppled over by the draft of a vented heat. Each bud was boastful and waxy and of a size that could bite the head off a moderate-sized rodent. It blocked half the television screen and infused the room with the heady stink of morning. It was Jimmy's work, that much Kathy intuited. His excessive generosity was the certain brand that begged for notice, which Peggy was liberal in providing. How could I miss it? How could anyone? Kathy asked. Frank sent chocolates and Paul a slew of books, Peggy said, motioning to the end table where the gifts were piled. They're good boys. Kathy leafed through the stack. She and her mother shared this pastime, though for different reasons. Kathy read as a means of burrowing into place, while Peggy read to be transported elsewhere. There were 7 novels in total, all large print paperbacks. Kathy paused over a historical fiction book with a compelling font. This sounds interesting. Take it. There's less of an urge to read about the war when you lived through it. Kathy anchored herself to keep from rolling her eyes. It was just like her mother to speak for an entire generation, as if she could decree how millions of people felt, as if no one of a certain age watched Saving Private Ryan or Life is Beautiful. Besides, what did the heroines of this historical novel have to do with Peggy, who weathered the war on her Missouri farm? Yes, she'd undergone rationing, scrap drives, Victory Mail, and neighbor boys who were lost in combat, but that was a far cry from being an active contributor. Did Peggy think she'd osmosed the experience of every wartime hero simply by being their contemporary? Or had she acquired their exploits by marrying one, inheriting his feats like any other asset? She hadn't even known Kathy's father while he was in combat. They'd met after Japan's surrender, when the troops were sent home. I'll leave it here in case you change your mind, Kathy said. And then to punish her mother, added, I'm busy, remember? After getting their snipes in, they settled into the affable rhythms of a social call. Kathy asked about her mother's hip, the progression of her strength and mobility, and if she was eating. As Peggy answered, sometimes at length, especially about the food, she unfolded her arms and her tone loosened. She called the pancakes flour frisbees and the beef inadvertent jerky. She was trying to make Kathy laugh, and she did. As Kathy prepared to merge into a discussion about what came next, she remembered the roommate on the other side of the curtain and felt suddenly self-conscious, so much so she lowered her voice. You'll be discharged in a few days. Thank the sweet Lord. Kathy plowed through her mother's rejoicing. Don't you think it'd be dangerous for a person in your condition to live in a 3-story house all by herself? In my condition? Peggy asked dryly. She didn't yet see what was coming, so she was still trying for humor. Is there a pregnancy I don't know about? I just mean, what are you rushing home to exactly? What are you trying to say exactly? Peggy mocked, but she'd gone still, a deer in an open field. Kathy took a breath to calm her nerves, but it only added a flare of melodrama. We were thinking, the boys and I, we were wondering if instead of returning to all those stairs, it might be better to transition you to safer accommodations. Kathy dropped the bomb and rushed to gain distance, dragging her mother before shrapnel killed them both. You are too important. We don't want you taking unnecessary risks. You should be surrounded by people who can make sure nothing like this happens again. Why don't you just package me in bubble wrap? Kathy continued her pitch as if uninterrupted. But you're in luck. Frank secured you a last-minute spot. I tripped one time, and you are ready to institutionalize me? Let's not get carried away. You're the one getting carried away. Peggy's fingers interlocked on her lap as if they were the only thing binding her together. This is no way to treat a person, least of all your mother. You are skipping steps, entire floors. We thought it'd be nice for you to have a built-in social network. I have a built-in social network, she said, nearly shouting. It's called family. Kathy felt the ceiling lower. Peggy had 4 children, but as the nearest, and really as the only daughter, Kathy was the sole buttress of responsibility. Her mother would need critical care. She couldn't be expected to provide that. You'll still have your children, Kathy said, though she had hardly had 3 of them as it was. You'll just gain more people around you. Peggy's breathing had grown ragged, and she began to frantically pick at lint on her pants. You're done with me. That's what this is. You and the boys have had enough, and you're ready for me to die. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you can't discard me like a bag of old clothes. I'm of sound mind and can make my own decisions. If you're too busy, that's your business, but you can't make me someone else's problem. I have free will and legal rights, and as soon as I can manage on my own 2 feet, I'm walking straight out of this dump and never coming back. The other place isn't like this, Kathy said. It has a pool. These crypts are all the same, meant for the feeble or demented, not me. Peggy's voice was rising again, and Kathy worried a staff member would come by to confirm everything was all right. Why don't we table this for now? Peggy stared at the blank wall inches from her face that divided them from the hallway. Her wistful determination would have looked more natural if her chair was positioned beside a window, as if gazing bleakly into her future. Kathy imagined her mother's internal dialogue. What does a woman have to do to get a view around here? Peggy said, if I have my way, when I leave my house, I'll be rolled out on a stretcher. Kathy considered turning one of Peggy's favorite overwrought directives around on her. Try to mingle, smile wider. It'll be an adventure. Don't you want an adventure? But just then, an acrid tendril snaked through the scent of lilies, wriggled up her nose, and blossomed into something fetid. Peggy's nostrils flared too. Oh, for God's sakes, Peggy said in an emphatic whisper. Thrusting her head toward the roommate on the other side of the curtain, she shat herself. They called for an orderly, who arrived with a bundle of starched linens as well as the women's lunch. He was rail-thin with acne pockmarks from what were likely difficult teenage years. He dropped the food trays by the door and, without any acknowledgement to Peggy and Kathy, crossed the fog of sick. The woman on the other side murmured a hello or an apology, but Kathy didn't detect any response. Kathy and Peggy sat vigil while he worked, as if it would be rude to chat while the roommate's humiliation was exposed and sanitized. While they waited, the stirred-up smell only garnered more power. Peggy tucked her nose into her high neckline, and Kathy cupped her hand over her face. When the orderly was through with what Kathy knew to be nothing short of a magician's trick, wiping the woman clean, laying a towel down, and remaking the sheets with her body still on the bed, Kathy made a point to search for his eyes, to offer appreciation and admiration. But his attention was locked on the floor, the sheets rolled into a soiled ball at his hip. Kathy waited for him to wash his hands and return to distribute the meals, though she had no idea how anybody could eat after that. The smell remained tangibly in her mouth and nose, and seemed to have sunk into her hair and clothes. She felt sullied, like Lady Macbeth hallucinating a stain on her hands. Out, brown spot. But the orderly never reappeared. He had left the trays on a stand by the door, like a kennel worker leaving a bowl for a dog. Kathy didn't know much about the roommate beyond that she might benefit from rice and a banana. But Peggy was a woman of good taste, a competitor who refused to call even the longest board game quits until there was a winner, a host who never let a guest's glass go empty, and a mother who annually decorated their houses into Christmas wonderlands. Her zip and zest may have aged into tartness and tang, but she was a person, and for a staffer to treat her as a stray animal was unacceptable, and Kathy had just been endorsing another facility. Hungry? Kathy asked, but she pushed her tone to ensure the joke wasn't missed. Peggy expelled a hard laugh from beneath her shirt mask. As God is my witness, I may never be hungry again. Should we move Jimmy's arrangement closer to get a better look? Kathy transported the heavy vase to the bedside, hoping one fragrance would overpower the other. They directed their noses toward it, repressing giggles so as not to embarrass their neighbor. Peggy peeled back her mouth covering and directed her face toward the curtain. How are you doing over there, Trish? Can I get you anything? The woman's voice returned meekly. No thanks, Peg, and sorry for the stink. Don't give it another thought. With a nose this old, I can't smell anyway. It was easy for Kathy to overlook her mother's strengths, concentrating instead on the ways Peggy hadn't done right by her. But this grace reminded Kathy that her mother was capable of profound love. She knew how to make a person feel special. Her attention often made Kathy feel special. Kathy hoisted her purse onto her lap and dug through it until she found a bottle of nail polish, which she shook to incite that satisfying clack. When she was 5, Jimmy told her the sound came from teeth pulled from little girls, and Peggy spilled the entire bottle onto a plate to prove to her it was only a metal ball. Then she made Jimmy sing his sister to sleep for the next week, not realizing how attached they'd grow to the routine. Jimmy sang to Kathy most nights until he moved out. Kathy said, I know you missed your nail appointment this week, so I figured I could paint yours, if you want. I'd like that very much. The approval sent a tingle down Kathy's spine, and she was brought back to the euphoria of their good times, lying across her mother's lap while she combed her hair, Peggy a cappella bugling while Kathy got ready in the morning, dressing as Lucy Ricardo and Ethel Mertz for an airbase Halloween party, dancing to American Bandstand in their pajamas, and Peggy bracing Kathy's bicycle seat around a cul-de-sac until she let go, sprinting alongside her, shouting, You're doing it, Catherine. Everybody look at my big girl. She's doing it. Kathy's tear ducts burned, so she returned her attention to her purse. I also picked up your mail. Start with the love letters and never get to the bills. Kathy set aside anything with a plastic window and stacked cards with return addresses she recognized, a Mayfield cousin, 2 Air Force wives, Peggy's childhood friend Constance, until she came upon creamy stationery that was plush enough to be cloth. This one feels expensive, Kathy said. You open it. I'm not wearing my glasses. Kathy slipped her thumb under the corner. The tear was decisive, and she felt a little like she was ruining something valuable. It was an invitation. She could tell by the separate piece for the ceremony details in the RSVP, but the gold insignia stamp made it seem governmental, a strange direction for a wedding, but military families could prove that brand of patriotic. Even so, the gold tassel was a bit over the top. Then the word Congress leapt from the page. Holy crap! She read carefully so she didn't misspeak. You're invited to a congressional gold medal ceremony. You're kidding. To recognize the women Air Force service pilots, Kathy said, laughing. Her father had served as a war pilot, though she'd never mentioned anything about the WASP. She felt the familiar rush for the man who had done so much and whose humility kept him from broadcasting it. Her pride was followed by the sharpness of missing him. Daddy must have done something special, and they're inviting you to honor him. You have to go. Peggy gripped the arms of her chair as if electrified. This has nothing to do with your father or with me. It's a bureaucratic error. Kathy figured Peggy was being modest on her husband's behalf, but it's a mistake. End of discussion. And I'll quickly fit in a little bit of the flashback from Peggy's perspective. Peggy was 8 years old when her daddy lifted her by the armpits and dropped her into a cockpit. The instructor said a place is no place for a little girl, that you'd be too scared. I told him, not my Peg. Are you making a liar out of me? Her daddy asked. She didn't know how to tell him that she wasn't scared. She was grateful. So she just shook her head and brushed tears from her face. They left the ground, Peggy on her father's lap and the instructor in the bucket behind them. And she was gifted something she didn't know that she desperately desired. The boys at school didn't let her play Red Rover, insisting she join the girls in hopscotch. And she burned the Lazy Daisy cake in home economics. Her father promised that her feeling of restlessness was because she was special, but she'd been starting to think it was just loneliness and that she was destined to be unhappy. But now here was the wind stealing her breath. Here were her feet off the ground and her head was in the clouds. The whole thing was a miracle. Her father had handed her a discovery, a potential to go anywhere, to be anything. She could fly, for God's sakes. By the time Peggy was in high school, she managed the Model A better than her father, but his crop dusting clients wouldn't abide a young woman spraying chemicals on their livelihood. She was a feisty little thing, to be sure, but they weren't willing to hand over their farm to a girl, no matter how pretty. Her value began and ended with what they saw before them. Thin eyebrows arced over eyes the shape of a setting sun, cheekbones high enough to create a cavity beneath their ridges, lips that could turn from sweet to cruel, and thick auburn hair that she, with her daddy's permission, tucked into her cap when she did his crop dusting business from then on. Peggy had watched with interest this last year as her former classmates packed their suitcases and left for positions in defense industries. It was unprecedented, women doing the work of men. She was tempted to join the tide, imagining the power of a riveting gun inside her grip, assembling a plane bolt by bolt and releasing it into the sky. It would be something to be surrounded by planes, but it would mean leaving her Model A behind and staying grounded. That just wasn't her brand of adventure. Then came the call. Male pilots were needed overseas, so for the first time in history, women were being trained to perform domestic flight duties on military aircraft. Peggy had to be one of those pioneer fly girls. If not her, a misfit in all other spheres whose body chemistry only calibrated at 1,000 feet, then who? This meant traveling 700 miles to Sweetwater, Texas. She loved her parents, particularly her daddy, but not more than she loved the idea of herself as a woman Air Force service pilot. There was so much evil, and with her special skills, she could do some good. More importantly, she could be seen as someone who could do some good. The possibility made her electric. She might just combust as lightning. Her desire wouldn't be enough in itself, no matter its unwieldy size. Only 8% of applicants were being accepted. She fit the age, education, and flight qualifications, but she still had to pass an Army physical and a written exam and be personally interviewed by Jackie Cochran, the first solo woman to win the Bendix Aeronautical Racing Trophy, a speed demon, and the most impressive female pilot of all time. Although Peggy had been scarfing down more than her share of fried Spam and victory cake in preparation, she was still 2 pounds below the weight requirement. She could fail the physical. There was a swirling inside her at that thought, where excitement eddied against nerves. She'd be damned if she missed this opportunity by the heft of a bag of flour. Peggy was soaring 500 feet in the air now. Who knew when she'd be back in this plane, in this sky, overlooking this town? She took in the neighbor's farm scattered with cows, bored by another muggy day, a sunflower field that carpeted all the way to the horizon, and the general store, gas station, and the post office that made up Main Street. The people here, who always looked at her askance as that bony gal with a pretty face and wind-whipped hair, who would never find a husband, would either, in a week's time, eye her like they'd been right all along, or she'd prove what she'd known from the very first flight, that she's destined for a higher purpose. Peggy rocked the aircraft, wagging her wings. Okay, that's it, I think. Thank you very much.
Alena! Chris, was that not a totally awesome reading? I'm fully involved in these characters now. I'm seeing them. I'm feeling for them. I almost had a tear. I was smelling things.
Yeah.
Wow. Alena, I mean, you always, I mean, just we all know that you're a superstar, but every single time we get to hear you read, like we get so deeply involved in these characters and in the stories and in the scenes. We have to know more, and we also love the way that you are representing having all of these genuinely incredible women characters and so beautifully, richly hewn. We love it, and it was just fantastic. Chris, I'm just gushing.
Oh, amazing. Well, I mean, in the first section, it's like it's so universal, right? It's everybody's whose parents get older and stuff. I mean, we can all identify with this. Oh God, this is so hard and everything. And then you get the zinger, right? It's like, whoa, mom she was what? A pilot. The story that, I mean, people don't know about this stuff. So
yeah, and it's not uncommon, especially with that generation, to have like done such incredible things and then just not talk about it for whatever reason.
I did that. That's so true, Alena.
People need to know. People need to know. They need to hear
do.
the story.
And it explains so much because, like, you only know your parents as who they were when you came into existence, and then when you learn things about them, it explains so much of your childhood and who they are and what you're passing on to all different generations that you have no backstory about.
100% Alena. And I think, I mean, my parents watch the show. They love the show. They love all of our friends and guests that come on here, but she's a super Alena Dillon fan, and she has spoken. She said, "Thank you, Alena, must read." We agree, Mom. Totally.
Cha-ching, another copy sold.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I know my mom, she might have gotten more than one copy.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Oh, Alena, that was just fantastic. Save your questions for the Q&A for Alena. It's going to be amazing. Alena, thank you once again so much.
Thank you again for having me. It's so fun.
Of course.
Thank you. Woo! What an awesome reading from Alena. I mean, it always is, but she's just knocking our socks off, and just these incredible, as usual. So awesome. Well, we have another superstar to welcome this evening. I'm so excited to welcome back to the show Baron Wormser. Hey,
Baron Wormser, the hardest working man in show business, right here.
Totally. How are you this evening, Baron?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here with you too. It's also a pleasure to hear Alena, who's obviously a great ball of writing fire. So
100 million%, Baron. We couldn't agree more. And there are so many exciting aspects about this evening, but it is always such an honor to get to welcome you, Baron. My mentor in the MFA, and also still a mentor and great friend, and someone I admire so much. So excited to hear you read and get to hang out with you this evening. I'm going to go ahead and read your awesome bio for our audience. Baron Wormser is the author of 20 books and has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. From 2000 to 2005, he served as Poet Laureate of the state of Maine. He is the founding director of the Frost Place Conference on Poetry and Teaching. Essays of his were included in Best American Essays 2014 and 2018, and his poems have appeared in many journals and anthologies. And check him out on Vox Populi. He has several essays up, and a new one that just went up really, really recently. Baron, we are so honored to have you. Take it away.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Chris. I'm going to read tonight from a novel that came out a couple months ago, which is Some Months in 1968. This is a novel about the first 6 months of that year, and which means it's about the war in Vietnam, among other things. I'm going to read from the beginning of the book. The book begins with sort of what set the stage for the American involvement in the war. 1954, Dien Bien Phu. They never drank those bottles. Before the year of this book, because there always is a before, because that is how history is. They're not the simple cause and effect of chronology, but rather the ceaseless, frightening, inspiring drive of human invention, of philosophies and flying machines. A battle and then a siege occurred in a Vietnamese valley near the Laotian border called Dien Bien Phu. The village that had once been there had become an encampment filled with thousands of French troops who weren't all native French, who were Moroccan and Algerian, in addition to the foreign legionnaires who included Germans, Spaniards, Poles, and Czechs. Professional soldiers, they were fighting the Vietnam People's Army, an army like the French army with units and divisions, and yet not at all like the French army, but rather a professional guerrilla force. This may have seemed a contradiction in terms, but wasn't, because they didn't have a nation yet to be part of. But that was why they were fighting, to expel the French from their homeland and have their own nation. Ethnic mountain people were fighting with the French too, along with Vietnamese who opposed the communist guerrillas. The French, overwhelmed at the end, wound up surrendering. In the course of months of fighting, hundreds of Viet Minh, as the guerrillas were known, got caught up on the barbed wire with which the French had surrounded their entrenched positions. Riddled by machine guns and rifles, the corpses dangled, mortal regrets, begging their comrades to pull them down. Behind the barbed wire, the French were literally blown to pieces by the constant shells the Vietnamese artillery threw at them, or were buried alive, their fortifications collapsing like sand castles. Not only were the French badly outnumbered, they were outgunned too. The Vietnamese had more firepower. The howitzers, mortars, flak guns, and rocket launchers they had trekked to the battle site through impossible terrain that wasn't impossible due to the determination of thousands of men and women who carried whatever needed to be carried, rice, weapons parts, gasoline, on their backs or on bicycles equipped with storage bins or with the help of draft animals. The French Air Force thought it would bomb the supply trails, but never found them because they didn't, in the sense of being identifiable roads, exist. One more thing the French didn't understand. To most of the French, the Vietnamese were not people, which was what the war was about. The French had owned Vietnam, and the people there were incidental and so less than people. The French thought they couldn't lose. They might lose a skirmish here and there, but in the grand sense of losing a war and what they called a possession, based not the least on the opium trade that could be traced back to 1861, that was impossible. Even at Dien Bien Phu, where the writing was on the wall to any military person who analyzed the factors, the French commanders had bottles of champagne ready to drink and toast their victory. They never drank those bottles. Something in the world changed because of that battle. Some shift occurred, not just about the power of nations, since not many years later, the United States was willing to pick up where the French left off, but something about how people thought about other people, how if you looked down at some people, even if you said that you respected them, even though you didn't because they weren't who you were, you did it at your own expense. Such shifts, of course, are slow. Okay, January 1968, poets do what they need to do. Now we're moving into the household of the Brownson family in suburban Baltimore, which consists of 5 members, Daniel and Helen, who are the parents of the Brownson kids, who are Tom, whom you will meet, and then Sharon and her brother, Herbert. So here we are, said Daniel. Daniel and Helen Brownson sat on the couch in the den they shared, her desk by one window and his by another, and reserved as a no television sanctum while raising their 3 children. They were facing their oldest son, Thomas, whom everyone called Tom, and who stood before them, his left hand gripping the wrist of his right arm. He was tall, but at the moment stooped, as if the weight of making a decision had pressed him down. Daniel had turned on 2 table lamps, but Helen, who followed him into the room, turned one off. Too bright, too early. I couldn't stay there. I made sure you'll get almost all the tuition and room and board money, and I'll pay you back the rest. I'm going to wash dishes where I worked last summer. I called Joe before I left school. He said I can start right off. A prepared speech, but spoken too fast. The announcing moment over, the grip relaxed a bit. He had come in late, let himself into the house with his key, gone to bed. woke after a fitful sleep, knocked on his parents' bedroom door, and now there was this. You realize, said Daniel, who wanted to finger jab at the air, but didn't. There's a war going on, and that you will have to inform the Selective Service that you no longer are a student, and that you will be reclassified and in all likelihood be called up for a pre-induction physical. The consequences all in a row and waiting. And why, may I ask, did you do this? Said Helen. Don't you think you should have talked with us? We are your parents. Her voice, usually clear with maternal purpose, trembled. Words she didn't want to say, a place she didn't want to be. If I talked with you, I wouldn't have done it. And that would have automatically been a bad thing, Helen said. We've tried, Tom, to be there for you and to listen. I hope you know that. Daniel got up, but then sat down, nowhere to go. The words in his mouth felt both real and stale. Tom stuffed his hands in his jeans pockets. I knew this would be hard, and it's not like I have a bunch to say. You just decided to blow your life up for no special reason. Helen looked away. Too many memories of her son at too many ages flooded her. He was 2, 5, 8, 12, 15, 17, now 20. It doesn't mean that. It means I need to live, and being in school was not living. Being in school was pretending, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't pretend to be interested when I wasn't. I know I'm going out on a limb. I know everyone is staying in school because they don't want to be on that limb. He stood a bit taller. Daylight began to seep through the room's farthest window. Another gray depths of winter day. It's not a limb. It's a war. And lacrosse? I told the coach. He said I was making a mistake, but still said, good luck. Helen looked up, a cobweb in a ceiling corner. She cleaned her house herself. Somehow I thought these things happened to other people. I thought the path we had made in life was a reasonable one, and that our children would see that and follow suit. What you are doing is not reasonable, but I suppose that goes without saying. She rubbed at her temples vigorously. I really do not want you in that army. I don't know what to say. I haven't thought it through, but Dad was in the army. He lived a different war in a different time, Daniel said. And no one in war knows anything about living. War is about surviving. If you're thinking of going, then I have to say I will disappoint it. I will always love you, but I will be disappointed. Helen stopped. I'm whimpering. How pathetic. Look, you both must think I've lost it, but I haven't. We'll see what happens. Tom edged toward the couch. Don't cry, Mom. I didn't leave to make you cry. I know you didn't. I'm sure you made your mind up in a way that made sense to you, and that if I begged you to go back, it would only make things worse. Yeah, my mind is made up. I packed up my stuff. It's still in the car. Daniel reached a hand to Helen, which she took. Minds of their own was a phrase they traded back and forth over the course of their children's growing up. They hadn't understood the phrase, though, until now. They were just well-meaning words. We'll help you with your gear, Daniel said. Your room is as you left it, except I put on some new sheets for when you came home later in the semester. Helen squeezed her husband's hand. Thanks, said Tom, thanks. He stood there rooted, an awkward, stubborn tree. Home again, home again. He had thought what it would be like, how there would be a feeling, like seeing yourself in a broken mirror. He hadn't heard, however, his parents' voices. Next chapter, a sister's voice, the wheedling needle of kitchen table proximity. You always put too much milk in your cereal. Is it your business? I have to sit here and watch it get mushy. Sharon looked around for allies, but no one took her up. Daniel was shuffling legal papers while getting soft-boiled egg on them. Helen was riffling through a tome about slavery she was going to read for the course she was taking, the last before getting her master's. Tom was in his bedroom, the door closed. Kix, to name the cereal in your bowl, is meant to be consumed right away. They'd make it soggy already if they thought it should be soggy. It's crisp and happy, and you make it soggy and sad. Don't be overly imaginative or anything. Her brother Herb raised a spoon. Cereal doesn't have feelings. Daniel looked up from his papers. Anyone have a paper clip? Did you look in your pocket? Helen asked. You should wear a necklace of them, Dad. Sharon made a theatrical gesture as if throwing around a long strand of pearls. Before various disenchantment set in, she had been in the school theater club and had a solo in a musical. Guys don't wear necklaces, said Herb. We know that, Sharon snipped back. All I wanted, Daniel said, was a paperclip. Your cereal is getting mushier, Sharon made an aggrieved face. I figure you're going to be a lawyer and investigator like Dad. You're so good at sticking your nose into other people's business. That's what you do, right, Dad? Herb put a spoonful of the mushy Kix into his mouth. Good. Daniel put on a weary frown meant to convey the hopelessness of parenting. The big shrug, as his wife called it. Daniel thought of Tom, and the frown deepened. The law, as I have informed you on numerous occasions, is about lies and money. Fraud is America's middle name. Justice is the dog chasing the fire truck. People do indeed pay me to stick my nose in their business and other people's business, if you want to put it that way. Herb beamed with vindication. What's with my other brother? I heard you guys talking. I heard Tom go back upstairs. Sharon took a bite of raisin toast. I think they're cutting down on the number of raisins per loaf. Is that how capitalism works, Mom? Fewer raisins and more money for Wall Street? As the daughter of socialists, which means I grew up on Jewish rye bread, I wouldn't know about the raisins. I do know your brother is home from college, for good it seems, and will be staying with us until further notice. You mean like a draft board notice, Herb asked? I shouldn't have used that word, Herbert. Herb can't help making puns, you know that. But why did Tom leave? He didn't tell me he was thinking of leaving. You're his confidant, said Herb. Another beam, this one ironic. He doesn't seem to have told anybody, Daniel said. He got an idea in his head, although I don't know if I should call it an idea. In high school, they call it a brain fart. Thanks, Herb. As I was saying, he's left school. What happens next, none of us know, least of all Tom. Though he did say he's going to wash dishes to earn some money. He left school so he could wash dishes and get drafted. Sharon rubbed her fingertips together to rid herself of a few toast crumbs. I thought Tom was the normal one in the family. You know, a jock. Did okay in school, but didn't take it too seriously. More girlfriends than I could keep up with. Plenty of drive around in the car buddies, even a black buddy who played lacrosse too. A regular dude, clear as a glass of water. And now? Sharon paused, but no one spoke. I'm waiting for some parental comment. Dad? You could say something like, well, Sharon, you're fishing in deep water. Or Mom, you could go for the low-key approach as in, well, did you find a paperclip, dear? Maybe you could write scripts for us and we could stop living, said Herb. I don't know about scripts, said Helen, but predictability looks pretty good to me. It beats going upstairs and crying, which is probably what I'll do when you all leave. She raised a china cup in a show of false cheer. Well, did you find a paperclip, dear? Thanks for asking, Daniel replied. I found 2. 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. Now we're going to move to a whole other place. In a dream, an ancestor told him he was going to die soon. An old, ill man. He already knew that, but the dream was preparation for a death in bed, not a warrior's death. Many times, Ho Chi Minh, the avatar of Vietnamese independence, might have died a warrior's death. Many times he learned how others died that death. If he indulged his memory, he could see friends of his youth who perished in the struggle, whose bravery had helped to achieve nationhood, but not yet a full nationhood, a nationhood that was not North and South. There was no shortage of proverbs about the futility of dividing anything. Division made no one happy. Everyone still wanted a full share. What was half a nation, particularly when one half was little more than a puppet? Yet people died every day for that puppet. To Ho's perpetual surprise, people pushed aside the truth of liberation, or he wasn't surprised. He understood how a person was born into a set of circumstances, however degrading, and lived with them, and was willing to die for them. He too had been born into a set of circumstances and duties, but something in him rebelled, something in him set him on his course, where many became his comrades, and yet he was alone, a determined man on his own. No one listened to him now the way people once had listened to him. He was a relic, a tie to the past, someone to be evoked, someone who had not just pointed the way, but fought for it. What an idealist he had been at the outset, how life had hardened him. But that was to be expected. No one gave up power graciously, and no one in the West bothered to understand the simplest facts of regional history. Why should they, when they could impose their notions by force? Why should they, when their prestige and honor were at stake, to say nothing of their investments? Despite the glossy speeches, power only respected other power. Someday, in a not too distant future, his people would be united and would live together and help one another. No one would look down on them. No one would tell them who they were. They would define their own lives. Was that too much to ask of history? That's why guns spoke last and strongest. Guns had an answer. People understood death. He sensed that his dream would overcome him, so that waking would be a dream too. He didn't mind that. Once he would have, but not now. He had had his fill. Younger men with their own ideas had come along to pick up the struggle. They would succeed. Ho was sure of that. He would die as Uncle Ho, someone who had steadily pushed forward, someone with a long-standing vision in his eyes and righteous blood on his hands. He could still receive visitors and talk courteously while soldiers tramped the road named after him and fought to the death. Some nights those deaths came into his dreams. but he had the gift of faith. The deaths were necessary. I'm going to go back now to the family in Baltimore and read you some of this, the next chapter. The necessary visitation, the right thing to do, the curious inquiry. 2 nights after Tom's arrival and after finishing her homework, French and U.S. history, Sharon knocked on Tom's bedroom door. "Come in," he boomed, the bass of cheerful indifference, older brotherness. In meant 2 baby steps. "So," Sharon said, trying to look bright-eyed, which was second nature in dealing with her brother, Tom being something of another planet, not serious the way she and Herb were. He tended to feign, roll off, and slip away airy, despite being such a solid, muscled guy. Always fine. For her, he took some work. "So," Tom answered back, "don't be your usual amiable sphinx self. What happened?" "What do you mean, what happened?" "I can be patient. I mean, you left school, you're home. You notice everything, Sharon. You're not easy to love, but I do. So school sort of lost it for you?" "It sure loses it for me." She was still standing by the door. No invitation to come in further and sit down. A man's castle. Tom, who was in jeans and a University of Maryland t-shirt, barefoot, walked toward Sharon and lifted his hands as if making a proclamation. School was a drag. You sit in auditoriums and you try to pay attention. But really all you want to do is party and get laid, which I did plenty of. Everybody sits there like the professors are saying the last words, but then everybody just wants a grade. He yawned and stretched. When he was a boy of 7 or 8, Helen was struck by his gracefulness and sent him to dancing school, but athletics, running around in the fresh air and yelling soon took over. There's a war going on, but the radical types didn't do anything for me either, making noise, but nothing more than that. That means you've thought about the war and about yourself? That means I'm here in my bedroom in a suburb of Baltimore talking to my sister, who probably can't wait to go off and further her education. Hope you do better than I did. He stretched his arms downward, touching his toes. Okay, I'll stop there. There's 330 some pages after that. Thanks for hearing me.
Baron, I am so involved. I'm in this scene in Baltimore in in this time period. I'm in these other places. I'm in this kind of tragic history. I'm feeling the weight of all these different the family situation, the situation in Vietnam, and so many quotable moments in here. Why should they when they can impose their notions by force? So many different really powerful, really important things going on, and just these very familiar characters in the midst of it. Just really, really powerful writing, as always, Baron.
So beautiful, and just the family dynamics, with the mushy cereal.
Oh my God.
And you capture that vibe of the family, and then there's this whole other thing going on, and in the world.
Yep.
Affect these people. It's very powerful.
Absolutely. Well, and since Mom had spoken for Alena, she also has a comment for Baron. Thanks, Baron. Thoroughly enjoyed the familiar story. My parents have all kinds of stories that have a very familiar vibe from that from that time, and I really really feels like you're just right there with all of these people. Just incredible, Baron. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, and we're so excited. We can people can purchase this book wherever books are sold. Is that correct, Baron?
Wherever books are sold, Katie. Yes.
Yes. I just like to sell. Well, we need to bring Alena back up here, and we need to sell everybody's books in here. Anyways,
right.
let's have another round of applause for Alena Dillon and Baron Wormser. What I mean, both of you are such superstars. I'm just like fully captivating. It's hard for me to tear myself away from, from the scenes and the stories that we have here. Both such excellent pieces of work, and both of them talking about these different experiences of war and what that's like on a personal level, on a family level, right, Chris?
That's right. It's our theme tonight. You get war and family, or family and war, depending on how you want to look at it. And well, there's always some kind of theme that emerges in these
always
things.
We love it. Well, and it's just the best to get to spend the evening with both of you. We love both of your writing, and we love both of you, so this is just such a big treat.
Yeah, no, I love being here. You guys have such a great vibe.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We do our best. But audience, get your questions in the chat. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter people, we can't see your comments live. So, text them over to me or something. But yes, please get those questions in the chat, and we will get them to our guests this evening. But let's kick it off while you're typing in your questions with a question from us. You both have been on the show before, so we're not going to ask our famous first question. We are going to ask a fresh question, a fresh first question. Chris, take it away.
Okay. It's to me. Well, I have to decide what that question is now.
I like the one you said about the influence.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. When you decided to become writers, however that decision gets made, who were your influences? Who were those writers that you looked toward, whether you personally knew them, which sometimes happened, or just knew their work, who you said, I want to be like this person?
Yes.
We'll start with Alena.
So when I went to Fearful You, I actually was a nonfiction concentration. So that had been my my goal, was to write essay and memoir, and to specifically humor. So at the time, I wanted to be like David Sedaris, Sloane Crosley, just everyone in that vein. And then I still want to be those people, I guess. But then I'm opening up to fiction writers now, which I only began doing after I graduated. And then when I was thinking of a kind of fiction writer I wanted to be, like, those people are like Wally Lamb was one of my very favorites even before he came to visit. She's Come Undone was my favorite book as like a teenager, early 20s. So when he arrived on our campus, it was like just incredible. And then Elizabeth Strout, I really love. Like her writing is so beautiful, and like the details that she picks are so precise and unusual. And she never veers from writing about quiet moments and like quote unquote unlikable characters, unlikable women, especially with Olive Kitteridge. And in my early, I'm still hopefully in my early career, but even like 10 years ago, what I often heard was that like my characters were too unlikable to publish. And so she was always like kind of a touchstone to see like how gritty humanity can be captured while still, having readers care about and be invested in their stories.
Totally.
And then Anne Patchett is just like kind of the sweet spot, I think, with like literary commercial like success, that zone. So so those are my idols.
Well, we love that, and it's so great. We just love to get inside your minds, hear about your influences and how that shaped you. Thank you so much, Alena. That's great. Baron.
Well, I'm a poet, And so I just wandered into this whole prose thing later in life.
You
So
said that so humbly.
so my initial influences were poets. My mom was a high school English teacher,
I
and
love
so she actually recited poetry. So I grew up actually hearing people like Whitman and Dickinson recited by my mom. And then I happened upon in high school a book that has sold well over 1 million copies, a poetry book, which is The Coney Island of the Mind by Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
Mhm.
And when I read that book, I just thought, this is the living end, basically.
it. That's awesome.
This is just so out there, and I want to be out there. And
So cool.
here I am.
And here you are.
I love that, Baron,
So
so much.
So who are your follow-up question? So who are your, since you've wandered into prose, just find yourself happened upon them. So who are your like novelist kind of heroes?
Yeah, it's kind of endless, really. Because I grew up reading the kind of the classic American fiction writers before me, so to speak. So Fitzgerald was just a huge writer. It still remains a pretty big writer for me. I read Portrait of the Artist by Joyce in high school and was just amazed, that people could do this, really. And just various people who, I'm always fascinated by the people who could do both, the people who could write poetry and prose. That means people like John Updike, who's really a very good poet and, of course, just a dazzling stylist, So, but then, then I read Go Tell It on the Mountain also in high school by Baldwin. And again, it was another book I just couldn't believe, basically.
Yeah.
And then, so I spent a lifetime reading Baldwin. And, for me, in terms of nonfiction, because I write essays, Baldwin's the Emerson of the 20th century to me. I mean, I just think he's great and immortal. So those are some of those. It would be a long conversation on that.
We love that. We get to kind of dwell in the richness of our guests, and then sort of the richness of your own literary influences and heritage, and these people that you love, who have inspired you, and that you so enjoy reading and recommending. We love to hear it. We love to hear it and hear about how it has affected you. That's so great. We have some questions that have come in the chat. Let's pop up this question from Derek Ivan Webster.
He's going to be reading here next week.
Yes, next week. Says both of these books deal with rich historic backdrops and clearly involved a heavy lift of research. Yes. Ooh, great question. Can either of you speak toward our process?
Your, I think.
Okay. Okay. Speak toward your process of detailing these worlds while still holding strongly to the reality breathability of the characters. All right, Alena, and then Baron.
So I did do a lot of research. I try to balance the research with like primary source materials and secondary source materials. And luckily I found this like treasure trove of primary. They have like this whole website that's devoted to the WASP legacy, in which they have like documents and songs and video clips and audio and the the Life magazine spread that they did on those women at the time. And so I just immersed myself in everything, and it's an extensive collection, and it was such a gift to find, to be able to see like clips of them training and to read like the bomber manual guide, like of like the checklist that they went through, the back and forth, to see so many photographs, to get like to be able to read their, because the WASPs were dismissed. They had been promised to be folded into the military, and then they were dismissed as soon as the war came to a close and weren't given any veterans benefits. And they went through a huge decades-long struggle, even that went up to like 5 years ago, just trying to get their due and getting buried in Arlington and getting like all sorts of benefits. So to be able to read that dismissal letter that they got and the language that was used, that was like, we know that you want to go home so that you don't replace the men that are returning. It was like, so just like to see how that, like that, the tone and like that letter, in fact, I just had to like copy and paste and into the book, because like I cannot write a better letter than that. Just to show like the kind of the passive aggression of
disrespect.
US government. And luckily, like the government materials you can just use. So that's in there. But yeah, just like that kind of research. So I did a lot of that at the front, just like to get a sense of the time and the mood and what the story is, and letting some of those like realities shape where my plot would go, and what the characters' motivations would be, and what their, the conflicts. So once I kind of understood the general story, then I began to write. And then anytime I had a question, which was like every page, about history, like what did a refrigerator look like at the time, or like how did these women get into a bomber, like then I would just go to the internet and kind of look that up so I can then continue writing. I don't know how people wrote before the internet.
Oh my God, Alena, like every single time we've had you on here, it is just the coolest thing to hear about your research process, with it being so involved and so extensive. And then, we reflect back on the reading we just heard from you, and we're like, yeah, of course she was there. Or with your other books, yeah, of course she was a gymnast, like, of course she was a nun. Like
I've lived many lives. Yes,
you lived so many lives, and you take that research and you make it so live and breathe in these characters. It's incredible. It's really incredible.
Alena, are any of these women pilots still around, or are they?
There are very few. I just saw last month that that one in Washington, I think it was, just celebrated her 100th birthday.
Incredible.
But they would have to be that age at like 95, 100.
Sure.
So unfortunately, when they finally received the Congressional Gold Medal in 2010, there was only like 200 alive at the time, and there had been over 1,000. So, and that was 12 years ago. So, so yeah, we are getting down to the last few.
Wow, Alena. Thank you so much. Passing this question over to you, Baron.
Well, I knew when I set out to do this book that I didn't just want to restrict it, so to speak, to the dynamics of the family. I wanted to show two very, very important historical figures and try to get into their heads. So that meant reading a lot about Lyndon Johnson and Jimin. And so that was just a fair amount of reading. About Johnson, there's a multi-volume biography by Robert Caro that is just an extraordinary book, really. It's one of the most amazing American biographies. Nice. There is a long biography of Ho. I had already, been reading about the war and, of course, lived through that era. So I knew a fair amount about it. And then, as Alena was saying, the internet is a help with all those just little details, that you're trying to right. When did they, Chef Boyardee, when did they stop hyphenating that?
It's a critical question here for believability.
But, we're trying to be honest in our ways. So, yeah, got to check all that kind of stuff out. So
I love that, Baron. That is perfect. That is perfect. That is so great. A quick follow-up question for you, Baron, coming in from Christopher Madden, and then there's a question from Mom. Okay, but Christopher Madden asked, Baron, how were you able to get into the head of Ho Chi Minh? It seems a Herculean undertaking, and yet it is a compelling and fascinating voice. I couldn't agree more. Tell us.
Well, again, as I say, I began as a poet, and I've always been fascinated basically with how far I can reach in my imagination in terms of empathy, which, of course, after all, is what Alena's doing, what fiction writers do routinely. I just came at it through the path of poetry.
Right.
And all I can say is in my very first book of poetry, there's a poem in there about the Russian revolutionary Trotsky.
Mm.
And after the book came out, someone wrote me and said, so how much time did you spend with Trotsky?
You were hanging out with him, weren't you?
Chillin'.
I wasn't hanging out with him. So I guess whatever, I'm good at it. And, it matters to me a great deal.
Hell yeah, Baron. But I love what you said there about, you came in to this through poetry, through imagination, through empathy, and that's how you get there. The rest is that, really intense research, but that imagination and that empathy will get you into the heads of all kinds of people. Baron, one of my most quotable Baron quotes is, I believe I can quote exactly, I never forgot about it, is imagination is the best legal way to get out of your conscious mind. It's one of my favorite quotes. Baron Wormser. And I thought that was so funny, but it's so true, because you had been talking about just how powerful and special having an imagination is, and I never forgot about that. Anyhow, thank you so much, Baron. So interested to read more from this book and from the perspective of Ho Chi Minh. Here's a question from Mom for Alena. Alena, do you have firsthand experience with dealing with aging parents? Your accurate depiction of the circumstances I experienced with my own parents rings very true. Oh, I was thinking about this, Mom.
Cool. So my parents are in their 60s, so I wouldn't say that they're aging. But my dad is suffering from chronic pain and autoimmune issues for about 10 years now. But he's still self-sufficient. But like I said, I have seen firsthand the decline of a parent in a certain way. But I've also just watched like my parents cope with their parents aging, and who are I still have two of them left, they're 95, and my husband's grandmother is still left and is 95. So I've had these windows into that, and just have seen like how it kind of defaults to like the women in the family, like how that falls, even if not consciously or like not deliberately, but like there's kind of like an implied presumption, at least in that generation. Maybe like for my generation it will be changed as things are evolving, but what a weight that is, and like how that kind of causes tension between the caretaker and the parent, and how you're like the role reversal is so hard to navigate. Like you have to the person that cared for you, but maybe didn't care for you in the way that you wanted to be cared for or needed to be cared for. And now you're supposed to reciprocate with patience and, love that maybe you think that you didn't get in the right way. And they still want to be independent. And it's like, it's all very tricky to navigate. So yeah, and then like with between the siblings, if you have a difference in opinion of how, your parent should be cared for, or like my grandfather passed away a few years ago and he had a heart condition, and there were people in the family that didn't think he should have surgery and other people that did, and he ended up having an aneurysm during surgery and died. So like that kind of tension and conflict that you like have to take on, and people have to live with the fact that they made certain decisions and people disagreed with them, and look what happened. And so like all that stuff, yes, was definitely taken into consideration.
Right. Absolutely, Alena. And that's just so all of those observations are so palpable in what you shared, and it is so vivid and so real. And not too long ago, I was watching my mom right here going through that with my grandma, and everything that you shared right there really rings so true. And mom was planning on getting the next Alena Dillon no matter what, but this one I think she'll resonate with even more. which is really, really awesome. I have a quick question for both of you before we get to our famous last question. During COVID, both of you were on here, and we asked you, how is writing going, during quarantine, during lockdown. And we know that COVID is still a very real problem out there. But many of us here in the United States are kind of living our post-lockdown lives, even though we're still hopefully being very cautious about COVID. So how is your post-quarantine, post-lockdown, post-vaccination writing lives going? How has your writing life changed since 2020? Baron and then Alena.
Well, there's a painting, an image of a painting that went around on the internet that was from the Renaissance, and it showed a gentleman sitting with a kind of quill pen writing, and there were three images of the same painting, and the caption was "Writer before COVID, writer during COVID, writer after." That's
good, Baron. That's true.
Because as all the people on the screen know, it's a solitary endeavor. So that's just the fact that goes with it. So there you are, And I think, again, how to say, as writers, we're sort of used to being pushed inwardly.
Right.
That's part of who we are. So I can't say honestly that it made a big difference. Honestly, Katie, as a writer.
Yeah, that's just such a great take to hear. Some people, like, we have some friends and acquaintances who, like, their whole writing life took off during COVID because it's like they finally had time. But those of us who have kind of been plugging along at this for forever, it's like, well, here I am still in this solitary moment. So that's a reflection absolutely of that experience, Baron. And I think that's a funny meme that you mentioned.
All of a sudden it became socially acceptable to hole up by yourself. Right. Versus, well, no, I'm sorry, I can't go to that party.
I'm serving society right now, okay? I'm saving all of us. I love it. And Alena, for you.
Yeah, my practice, my writing practice hasn't changed, but I career-wise, I can see differences. Like, it seems like, if you're talking about marketability, like as readers and viewers, I think our appetites have changed by the pandemic. So I'm finding certain topics more difficult to sell than they might have been a pre-pandemic. Tastes have changed because people are, I think, just the base level anxiety is just so much more elevated that there's there's a lower tolerance for then immersing into this a fantasy world that also has that heightened anxiety. I think people
no more dystopia, please, right?
Yeah. I think people are looking to calibrate, with their entertainment. So with my books that are optioned, people, in Hollywood were hearing more Ted Lasso, not so much, gymnastics girls being, taken advantage of, or, that kind of thing. So, so I'm finding that to be an obstacle, but
a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
That such a great observation, Alena. That's I think I would say that's definitely palpable, and that's a shame too, because that powerful, important stuff needs to get out there.
It does. I guess it's cyclical though. Like like people in the industry are not surprised by that, like the publishing industry or Hollywood.
Right.
Like it just goes, like it just trends. So like,
Right.
people are
Right.
into certain topics or themes, and then they're not, and then you just wait, and it's
Right.
just kind of all influenced by what's going on in our culture and our lives and politics, and so yeah, that's just the way it is.
True.
Yeah, feel good. You need the feel good comedy thing right now. But of course, you start that now, and then you finish it next year, and then by then it's who knows what's.
I know, exactly. There's no way to, so you just got to keep doing it and hope that
keep
it
at it.
works out.
It'll
You
find
do
its
it
right
for
place
for
at the
different
right time.
reasons. Like
Yeah.
you just like serve yourself rather than writing for anything else.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, it's about that time in the evening, Chris.
Yes.
Though both of these incredible writers have have had this question before, it bears repeating.
Yes,
We
because they
can
are.
never
They
have too
are.
many pearls of wisdom from these two.
That's right. They are fonts of wisdom, both of these people. So we ask. We'll start with Baron, which is who has much wisdom to impart to us people out here in the world. Words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom about writing, whatever it is. I always remember your read a poem every day. I remember that one, which I already basically did anyway, but I thought that was every time I read a poem every day, I think of you, Baron. But some other words of wisdom, and followed by a book recommendation, whether it's F. Scott Fitzgerald or whoever you want to recommend.
Yeah, sure. In terms of a so-called pearl, don't just read a poem, write the poem down word by word. So it is really the best way to get inside poetry and to get inside language, because you're recreating the poem word by word. Of course, you could do this with prose too. Supposedly, Hunter Thompson wrote out the whole of The Great Gatsby.
My God. Which
would teach it. And I have a friend who wrote out the whole of Paradise Lost word by word.
Wow.
So that's the pearl. The book that actually is a book I just finished reading a day or two ago that I had never read, which is a novel by Sherwood Anderson, well-known American fiction writer, best known for Winesburg, Ohio.
Yeah.
But I read a novel by him called Dark Laughter that really amazed me, both in terms of style and what the story is about. I was just actually emailing with a friend this morning that the book almost feels like a missing link in American sort of poetic prose fiction writing, which in the sense that you could almost see where Jack Kerouac came from.
Wow.
When you read Anderson's novels. So Dark Laughter would be a book I would recommend, Chris.
That's great.
Awesome. Thanks, Baron. And Alena, a pearl and a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to give you a pearl that I've used before, so I'll say this. When I was reading from that book, which I haven't, when once a book comes out, you might not have written it for 2 years. So I haven't seen the material in a while.
Oh my God.
So as I was reading it, I realized that I've used a lot of that language in the book that I'm writing now. I would say there's value in revisiting your old material just to make sure that you're not repeating yourself. Keep it fresh.
Or you know what? I still sound like Alena Dillon. That's me. That's me on that page.
That should just be my signature. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how people I've actually read that people say that on Twitter and stuff. If you find an author that you love, and then you're I'm going to get all their stuff and read it. And then you're oh, wow, they recycle things and they sound the same, because we're all human. And how can you who's watching out for that. Like
That's
the
right.
same things come to mind because it's my same mind. But yeah, so I don't know how to avoid that. But I guess taking a skim here and there of some other things
Take
might
a skim.
be beneficial.
But you know what? Like I kind of love that because that that's part of what makes it like you. I have had the same experience, Alena. Now that you've mentioned it, as I'm reading through my poems from my book and my manuscript and anything new that I've written, and I'm reading quite a bit at once on those. Oh, yeah, this is something that I return to. Oh yes, this is a word I like to use.
Well, like it makes sense because like it's the same thoughts that you have because I don't know how to get around it, but I'll try to be fresh.
That's great. I love it.
And then a book that I'll recommend is this year I had the first experience of my life where I finished a book and then went to the first page and read it straight through again. I liked it so much.
Love it.
So that was Night Bitch. And they're it's being turned into a movie. So but yeah, I mean, it's gotten huge buzz. I'm not like the only person to be advertising it, but I also was struck by it's like such an inventive premise, and it's like a very different story and beautifully written. It's Rachel Yoder is the author.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much, Alena. That's fantastic. We love just collecting pearls from our guests and recommendations. It's such a
When you
pleasure.
talked about like going back, this would be an assignment for an unpaid intern, perhaps, to go back, or at least an intern is paid the same that we're paid, but it's going back and
That's right, Chris.
and watching all 114 of these things and like compiling all the words of wisdom, the pearls of wisdom.
Yes.
Perhaps Woodhall Press would be interested in that.
Yes. Can you also use your intern to read all my books and then read my new manuscript to make sure I'm not repeating myself?
You're not like accidentally like plagiarizing yourself.
Marie, sorry, what was the name of it? Night Bitch, right?
Night Bitch, yeah.
It's pretty memorable name once.
That's a fantastic name.
Yeah, it's about a mother who turns into a dog at night. It's
that's
not
awesome.
usually my genre, but like it really worked for me.
It was cool. It was good. Well, we love that. And yes, no, Chris, I remember your idea here, and we need to get someone to collect all the pearls into a book. 114 shows at this point. We have a lot of pearls out there.
That's right.
Yeah, but
these guys get their own chapters.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much, Alena Dillon and Baron Wormser. Woo! One more round of applause.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to read for us and to answer our questions. It's always a pleasure. We are so excited for all of your books. Thank you so much to our audience. Get out there and get the latest and the back catalog and the catalog for Alena Dillon and Baron Wormser. Just such incredible works. Next week, Chris, we're going to be back with
Rebecca Dimian and Derek Ivan Webster will be here. It's going to be more groovy stuff going on here.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah. Thank you once again, Alena and Baron.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And have a good night, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Everyone.
Good night.